Greetings, fellow listener. I will be your guide as we turn back the hands of time and space and dive into the obscure. Tonight's destination, May 21st, 1976, for the Milpitas Monster. Strap in and enjoy the ride.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is Jacob K. Baker for Atomic Stick Figure Productions, and now that we've got that incredibly creepy intro out of the way, let's talk about tonight's movie, The Milpitas Monster, from 1976, also known as The Mutant Beast, which is the actual title that I found the DVD under. A little bit of a backstory on this film. It was made over the course of 3 years by some high school students. Not just high school students, they actually managed to convince everyone in the town, the little California town of Milpitas, to actually help make this movie. So it's not just like a bunch of teenagers out filming a bunch of nonsense. It's actually a bunch of teenagers, the mayor, the cops, the fire department, and all their neighbors, and the citizens of Milpitas itself getting together to make a bunch of nonsense. The reason why I decided to use this movie as the great opener for my new segment, ObscuReview, I was really trying to figure out what kind of a movie would best be suited for this format, and I didn't want to just rehash a lot of the stuff that a lot of the other reviewers did. Zazubar, he covered the Godzilla and Gamera films, and Kaiju Noir, he covered pretty much every other giant monster movie ever made, except for the Milpitas Monster, which is, I guess you could consider it pretty obscure. I mean, I had heard about it growing up from my dad, who I don't remember if he had actually seen it or not, but he had heard about it, and I believe there was even a couple of write-ups in Famous Monsters of Filmland. And I believe there was some pictures, because I would think I saw some pictures of the Milpitas Monster itself in there. So, this movie seemed like the perfect fodder for this format. Much like my review for Godzilla Battle Royale, I will be giving a synopsis for the film, including some snarky commentary here and there. And then I will give you guys sort of a rundown on my thoughts of the film, and then my final rating for the film. So I guess let's just go ahead and get into the actual synopsis for the film. Spoiler warning, I mean, you can't really spoil a movie like this because there's really no way to describe this movie outside of it's just a typical monster movie. But it's not really a typical monster movie. But more on that after the synopsis. So let's get to the movie, shall we? The movie starts out with a logo from the company Samuel Golden Air, which is this complete fakey company, and the logo itself is a spoof off of the MGM logo. And at first, when you see the logo, my initial reaction was, okay, well, this doesn't look too bad. I mean, yeah, it's a spoof, but you know, the character in the center of the screen is this Spartan-looking dude. And, you know, it's actually a pretty nice-looking logo. But then the guy takes off the helmet, and then he roars like the MGM lion. And it was at that point that I realized, okay, well, we're in for one heck of a ride. So, after the logo, we get a brief history of Milpitas, complete with an annoying slideshow about how the town got founded and how it progressed to the modern era, and a narration about garbage. Yes, the Milpitas Monster is focused around garbage. It was the mid-70s. Everything was about pollution. Not really anything surprising on that front. But yeah, we go through this little montage, and then we get the opening title, which, for the DVD release that I bought, like I said, it was called The Mutant Beast when I bought it, they superimposed a black card over the title and then did this really crappy digital alternate title, which is odd because if you sit through the credits actually end with the title The Milpitas Monster. Very confusing, very strange. So anyway, after the opening title and the opening credit sequence, we get this montage of people taking out their garbage and going about their morning routines, and then the montage tapers into them going outside to check on the garbage cans and finding them tipped over, with garbage everywhere, and these gigantic footprints that no one notices. Apparently, the citizens of Milpitas are completely blinded to the obvious. Then we get a garbage truck that's picking up one of those garbage containers, and it goes to dump the garbage into the back, and then the giant monster reaches down and grabs the container away from the truck, which causes the truck driver to inspect what's going on, only to be attacked by said monster. After this little sequence, we meet our cast, which immediately starts annoying me, because our cast consists of two groups of teenagers. The first group consists of this girl named Priscilla and her dumbass boyfriend, whose name I forget, and I wasn't about to rewind it to learn what this guy's name was because honestly I didn't care enough. But he does have the nickname of Penguin. So there's that. And then we get introduced to the second half of our cast, if you want to call them that, which I lovingly refer to as the Dumbass Brigade. There's really no other way to describe these guys except that they're complete and total dumbasses. They have a nice car, though. Okay, so after we get to meet our cast, we then get a couple of scenes of the cops checking with the citizens about the fact that their garbage cans are missing. Then we get this other shot of our cast driving around, and then we cut to a scene of the cops investigating the garbage truck, which has been flipped on its back. And here we establish that the monster is 50 feet tall. After we get done at this location, then we get to meet the town drunk, who is at a polluted water source. They never establish if he's at a lake or a stream or what it is. He's just near some body of water. But after we get done with our first meeting with the town drunk, he tosses his wine bottle into the water, and we get to see this stop-motion hand of the monster as it tries to swat away the bottle as it drifts towards the bottom. And then we get to hear the monster's roar. After this, then it cuts to a research boat, which is taking samples of the surface of whatever body of water this is. Like I said, it's never established if it's a lake or what. It could be the ocean side, for all I know. I didn't look up the geography of Milpitas to know if it was by the ocean or not. But at any rate, we get this. The research boat is looking into the soil samples, and it's here that we learned that the soil sample contains massive doses of hydrogen sulfide. And they also start looking at the fish from the area, and the fish are dead and have cancerous tumors. Then we cut to a science lab where they're talking about how they find trace amounts of methanol, and they're just, running tests on the soil and the fish. After we get done at the science lab, then it cuts back to the outside where we are treated to a clip of rain to establish it's raining. And as it rains, it starts washing the water from the local dump into the water, which awakens the monster. And this is actually a pretty cool sequence. Monster rises up from the water, marches onto land, and then it looks at the bum for a little bit, and then it saunters off, really establishing nothing at all. Then it attacks a farm, and we get to see the first shots of this thing. I can't remember if it's a full body shot or if it's just the side of it. But we get to see it both in stop motion form and in suit form. Then it cuts away from that scene, which is actually kind of cool, and then goes back to the town drunk, who wakes up and decides that he really wants a drink. And then he notices that his still is broken, And then he decides that he's going to go wander into town and try and find some booze, and on his way passes a gigantic footprint. And then it cuts to City Hall, where there's this conversation about garbage cans. Yay. Awesome thing to have people talking about at City Hall. At any rate, then we have a airplane that arrives at the airport carrying Randy. I did not write his last name. I don't even think they even give him a last name. But anyway, we get this establishing shot of the plane arriving with Randy, who's doing research for Washington, pertaining to the garbage, because apparently that's something Washington is really concerned about. Then we go back to the bum who's reading through garbage at a bar/pool hall. And then we cut back to the dumbasses who are discussing a prank, and the prank entails them spreading garbage around the town, increasing the citizens' fear about the fact that there might be a monster on loose. But not all goes as they had planned as they're discussing their little scheme, because one of the teachers walks upon them and interrupts their little conversation, and one of them left a cigarette, a joint, a crack pipe. It's not really stated, but someone was smoking something in the car, and something in the car caught on fire. And, of course, the guy who owns the car, he starts freaking out, and then the teacher tells them to go to the principal's office, where they, of course, go into the principal's office, and as a reprimand for smoking at school, he forces them to work for the school. Really confused. I don't think schools do that. But anyway. Then we cut to cheerleaders standing next to a football field while football players play football. Duh. But it's here where it is discovered that the school has a cannon. A cannon. The school has a cannon. That's like the best school ever. The school has a cannon. And apparently it works, because that's what the dumbasses are currently doing. While there's football practice, they're trying to get the cannon to work again, which they do. And during this entire scene of them messing around with the cannon, the Penguin and Priscilla are discussing things. I can't remember what, and I also didn't care. But they decided they're going to go to a carnival. Then we cut to the carnival, where a bunch of nonsense happens and nothing really interesting occurs. And then we cut back to the dumbasses who start breaking into the school to steal sulfur. Then we cut to the carnival some more, and then we cut back to the dumbasses spreading the sulfur around to add to make their prank more convincing, which attracts the monster. And as it attracts the monster, they find footprints. Although no one pays attention to the fact that, hey, there's these big-ass footprints. But anyway, then we go back to more carnival nonsense where Priscilla breaks up with Penguin, and because the guy is a total D-bag. And then we get this really neat shot of this forced perspective shot of the monster marching towards the carnival. And then the next scene that we're treated to is what could be like the aftermath of this thing attacking. However, the scenes after that indicate that the monster didn't really attack. I'll get more into that later. Anyway, the entire sequence there, as cool as it is really confusing. Then we go to the news interviewing citizens about the footprints in the garbage cans, and which cuts to a bunch of angry citizens outside of City Hall, who then break into it during a City Hall meeting, and which causes everyone in the meeting to leave, really, accomplishing nothing. Then we go back to the drunk, and who goes to a bar, and then it cuts to the police investigating the footprints again, and here it's indicated that the footprints are getting bigger. Then we get this radio report which confirms that pollutants are connected to the footprints. Oh yeah, the monster appears at a restaurant across from the bar where the drunk is, and it starts eating the garbage. Drunk comes outside, he sees the monster, he thinks he's hallucinating, so he starts trying to mess with the monster. Somewhere in the recesses of his drunken brain cells acknowledges the fact that, hey, this thing might actually be real. So he goes back inside the bar, and the monster sticks his arm inside of the wall of the restaurant. I could never figure out why it was reaching inside the restaurant, because I couldn't see garbage cans or anything that would indicate anything this thing would be after. But as it reaches in, it winds up shorting out one of the fuse boxes, which causes the restaurant to explode. Them fuse boxes, those things are dangerous, man. But after this nice little scene, then we get the firemen who are investigating the incident. Cut back to the mayor, who begins to recruit a task force to handle the monster situation. And then they had this little meeting in a room. Why they didn't have it at the city hall is beyond me. They just go to some guy's office and they have this conversation. But anyway, while they're in this meeting of the task force, they receive a call from a man called Lynchburg, who tells them that they need a device to track the monster known as the Odorola. Then we cut back to the dumbasses who discuss meeting the drunk because they want to pull some kind of shenanigans at the school dance that night. And then we cut yet again to the Odorola being delivered to the task force. And back to the school dance where the dumbasses show up with the drunk. At any rate, while these shenanigans are going on inside the school with them really humiliating the town drunk, the monster appears at the school. We get the shot of Penguin at home, who finally decides that it's time to change his life and really impress the woman he loves. And then he gets in his car and starts heading towards the school, and at the same instant, the task force is driving to the school as well. Now, while they're on their way, the monster inadvertently winds up abducting Priscilla. Then the task force and the Penguin arrive, and Penguin and the dumbasses, they go and get the cannon from earlier, to which they shoot one of the monster's wings and causes it to fly off back to its lair, with Priscilla in tow. This causes pretty much everyone in the town to track down the monster, and whenever they track it back to its lair, they find the missing garbage cans. Oh, yay. Then one of the dumbasses and Penguin discuss to themselves, how to get to Priscilla, and the plan they come up with is truly ingenious. They decide to cut holes in the bottoms of garbage cans, hide inside the garbage cans, and sneak up on the monster. Someone watch the killer shrews. As this is going on, the other people decide that they're going to use the town drunk as bait to distract the monster. That's kind of a dick move, guys. And apparently one of the reason why they're going to use a town drunk as bait is that apparently this dude really, really stinks. And the monster, of course, is attracted to really horrible smells. So that's exactly what they do. They have this guy climb inside of a garbage can, which is suspended from the bottom of a helicopter. And they fly this helicopter up above this radio tower. And the monster, smelling the guy's stench, puts down Priscilla because apparently he got bored with her. And then he decides to climb up the radio tower to take the bait. While this is going on, the dudes actually do manage to rescue Priscilla. The monster grabs the drunk, one of the dumbasses, and this other guy, what he is never really established. They set up dynamite charges beneath the radio tower and blow up the tower, which causes the tower to fall over and kill the beast. After the monster is destroyed, then we get the announcer who comes back and says that the monster is chopped up and put in these different containers and taken out to the garbage dump. And he has this nice little dialogue about how the drunk has become like the town legend, and that even though he was taken by the monster, everyone believes that he still exists out there. And then we get the shot of the drunk getting up out of the garbage after the monster's parts are delivered. And then he goes to find booze, revealing that the guy is completely okay. There's no need for him to become a legend. Obviously, he walked back into town where they would have met him again. Anyway, Then he tries to find a drink from a bottle and finds out the bottle is empty, and then he tosses it into the water. And it is here where we hear a monster's roar. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the film ends, leaving us with the question, is the monster still alive, or is there another one that has been born from man's garbage? All right, let's get into what I gathered from this movie, what it did wrong and what it did right. One of my initial gripes about this film is that even though the description I gave you would indicate that stuff happened in this movie, nothing happens in this movie. I mean, there's so many plot points that are brought up, but they don't go anywhere with it. Like the guy who's doing research for Washington about the toxins. There's that one shot of him arriving in an airplane indicating that this guy's important to the plot, and then they never get back to him. He's just something they filmed and then tossed in. There was all the stuff involving like the scientists who were researching the toxins in the lake body of water or whatever it was. The people at the lab and, all this cool stuff that would have been kind of neat to stick around for because they could have delivered some scientific reasoning behind the events of the film. But no, we get the shots of them and then that's it. They go nowhere. Which is odd because of the characters who we are forced to watch for the duration of the film. And I'll tell you this right now, I didn't care for any of the characters. I didn't care if they lived, I didn't care if they died. I honestly, at times, just wished they would die. I mean, the two, I can't even really call them the main characters, but we have the Penguin and Priscilla. Now, Priscilla and the mayor, I'll toss him in here too. I have nothing against their characters because they weren't really developed. I mean, the only thing we found out about Priscilla was that essentially she's a woman. That's the extent of our knowledge what this character is, that she's a woman. Now, Penguin, on the other hand, oh my goodness, this guy is just so annoying. I mean, I wanted to reach the TV and just punch this guy in the head. I mean, I've heard of social misfits before, but this guy, he is clueless as to how to act around women, and the only thing he does the entire time that he's with Priscilla at the fair is complain about the fact that he's there with her. And I mean, I don't blame her for dumping him, because if I was dating someone like this guy, I would drop kick their ass as soon as possible. And then, of course, we have the Dumbass Brigade. Why these people figure so much into the movie is beyond me, because 3 seconds into meeting them, I wanted them to die. They were annoying. They were memorable, but they were memorable in the fact that they were annoying. And, I mean, all they did was just cause harm. And yet, these guys were brought in at the end to help take care of the monster. My brain can't process that. The only thing I can see as to why they were chosen for this film was because they had to have been the guys who actually came up with the film. These were the guys that made the movie. That's the only reason why these guys are in this movie. Now, there is one character. He's not a great character. I mean, much like the other characters, as soon as we got enough of this guy, I really wanted him to die too. But it is the town drunk. Now, I can say this about this character. He actually had dialogue that made me laugh. There was 3 laughs that this guy managed to deliver. And I'm not entirely convinced that it's because his lines were all that funny. I mean, it could have been that the rest of the movie was so horrible that it just made his sequences seem funny. Which is an issue with this film, is that it's supposed to be a comedy, or at least it's supposed to be campy. But the humor used in this film is just so bad. If you're going to write a movie and you want it to be funny, have someone who actually knows about humor read through your film before you have it released. That way they can either tell you, hey, yeah, that's a good joke, or they can pop you in the side of the head and go, what were you thinking? That was a terrible joke. I mean, if I would have been a person who had to read the script first, I would have punched so many people. And of course, it's not as though the bad humor really mattered much because you couldn't hear the audio anyway to hear the really stupid jokes. I would say that it's just the print that I have, but I highly doubt it. I mean, this is an old film. I mean, I doubt it was kept in any good condition for any possible release. And I mean, the audio itself, obviously, whoever filmed this, they didn't care about how the film sounded. Because, like I said, there's the sequence at the school where you have this band, and then the leader gets up and he has this announcement that he tells the entire auditorium. But the entire time that he's talking, you can't hear a single word that he's saying. It just comes out. If you have someone in your movie talking and you want us to pay attention to them, it kind of helps if we actually know what they're saying. There were some scenes that were filmed in a way that you could actually hear what they were saying, and then there was other scenes where they actually went back and they dubbed the sequences. The problem with this is that you can tell whoever it was that were rereading their lines for the audio overlay were reading from a script because their audio didn't match the lips. But now that we're done the human half of the story, you're probably thinking, well, if the human stuff was that terrible, then surely the monster stuff can't be that much better. Surprisingly enough, that's not the case with this film, because the special effects for the film actually are not bad. I mean, we have miniature sets in this film. They actually had enough of a budget to make these miniature sets, and the miniature sets that we get, while they're not that big of a set, they look good. I mean, the restaurant across from the bar, they built that as a set, and it looks fantastic. And then we have the outside of the school, and again, it looks fantastic. Of course, these scenes were also shot at night, so that probably aided in making this stuff look a lot better than what it was. But even so, for a film that had nothing of a budget, the sets were actually pretty decent. There's, if memory serves right, there's really only one vehicle that they show with the monster, and it's a helicopter. And the model work itself, I've seen worse. You know, I've seen worse in like Ultraman. I've seen worse in gamer movies. And at times, I've actually seen worse model work in a Toho film. So, yeah, the guys doing the effects work for this film knew what they were doing, which is startling because apparently no one else in the movie did. So, what about the monster effects? I mean, surely the monster itself can't be that decent, can it? Well, we'll get to the look in a little bit. Now, the way that this monster was pulled off, it was done as both a stop-motion puppet and a guy in a suit. And I have nothing against stop-motion. I mean, stop-motion is what got me interested in doing effects in the first place. But when you have the same creature being done in two different styles, the transition is incredibly jarring, especially if you cut from a stop-motion sequence directly to a suit sequence, which they do a couple of times. Now, the stop-motion work itself, it's not that good. I'm going to be honest, it's not that great at all. They did make the puppet look pretty close to the suit. The proportions are not the same, but the overall appearance of the monster is pretty close. Now, along with a stop-motion puppet, they also had these really, really well done flying sequences. And I don't know if it's the stop-motion puppet for these sequences or if it's a different puppet. But this thing in flight, I mean, they're just really quick shots, but they're done really well. I mean, it looks like its wings are flapping at just the right speed. And I mean, it's actually really, really good. And then, of course, you know, it's pulled off with a suit. Now, the suit itself, again, I've seen worse suits. I've seen a lot better suits, but this suit actually isn't that terrible. I mean, you can tell it was sort of a slapdash thing. it really didn't distract from the monster's design, except for a couple of key sequences where it had like a close-up of the hand and you could see the fingers bend. And then anytime they showed the feet, because the feet just really weren't designed that well. And then, of course, you could tell it was a guy inside of a baggy suit. But, like I said, I've seen worse. If this thing was on like an episode of Lost in Space, it would probably go down as one of the better Lost in Space episodes because the monster actually looked pretty cool. Before I discuss this creature's overall look, I want to talk about the roar. This thing has the roar of Rodan. Initially, I mean, it was, you hear Rodan's roar, you think, oh, it's going to look like Rodan. And then it's coming out of this thing. At first it would have been a complaint because to me that's Rodan's roar. But then again, in the Heisei Godzilla films, Rodan's roar was used in 3 movies that were shot back to back for 3 different monsters. The Godzillasaurus, Batra, and then of course Fire Rodan. So this roar had been used multiple times for different monsters. And after having that realization, it didn't bother me that much that the Milpitas Monster actually had Rodan's roar. It's actually kind of fitting for the design. Now let's talk about the look of the monster. This really isn't a monster that you can just really write home about. I mean, it's sort of a pretty basic monster design. It's the Mothman, basically. It's a humanoid creature covered in fur with these giant eyes, wings, and then taloned hands and feet. That's the extent of the design, folks. I mean, you look at the face. The face is actually kind of neat to look at just because I have no idea what it's supposed to look like. And you can tell that the head was built around some kind of a gas mask or a biohazard mask or something like that. Just due to the shape of the eyes and then the nose, mouth thing towards the front. You can tell is like the vent area on a mask. And then beside this area are like these little tubules that stick out from its face, which sort of gives the creature a Man-Thing style look, and you guys know how I feel about Man-Thing. So yeah, the design itself isn't bad. I've seen a lot dumber designs, and I mean the monster's look in this film, I really like it. So kudos to the people who came up with the monster and all of the effects people, because this stuff was actually really well done. Now let's talk about the monster's personality. Yes, the monster's personality. Probably thinking you just described the monster. Do we really need to talk about its personality? Yes, we do. Because this creature is not an evil monster. It is a creature that eats refuse and then goes back to its home. I mean, one of the things that I would have done if I was behind this movie, knowing that it was supposed to be a comedy, is I would actually have had it end where they decided that they were going to make this big pit outside of the town where they were just going to toss their garbage every morning, and this thing would actually eat the garbage and then just, go back to sleep. I mean, the thing really didn't do any harm. I mean, it set fire to the restaurant, which then exploded. But that was an accident. It kidnapped Priscilla. It didn't kidnap her intentionally. It looked inside of the school and saw the garbage cans lying on the ground and then reached in to grab the garbage cans. But whenever it reached in, it had to lower its head so that it couldn't see inside the windows anymore. And it was just blindly grabbing. And instead of getting garbage cans, it accidentally grabbed Priscilla. And I imagine that the monster's reaction through this entire scene is, it was just looking at her curiously trying to figure out, what is this thing? I can't eat it. What is it? And then even whenever it goes back to its lair before it goes up the radio tower, it puts Priscilla down safely. This isn't a monster that's out to destroy anything or anyone. It just wants to eat. And I actually felt sympathy for the monster, which we're not supposed to have sympathy for because they didn't intend it to be a sympathetic monster. But then you stick the human cast in my face that you had for this movie, and I can't help but feel sympathy for the thing that's actually not annoying me. Oh, another thing that I need to talk about. I should have talked about it earlier, but I will discuss it now. because we really need something on a high note to end this this little conversation on. And I'm going to point out two sequences that were actually super well done. I mean, these scenes, it was almost as if I was watching a real movie whenever I was watching these scenes. And the sequences in question are whenever the creature walks out of the water and whenever it's at the amusement park. Whenever it's coming out of the water, whatever body of water it's coming out of, it's the photography is done really well. I mean, we get to see this thing's feet as it marches up, and that's the first thing we get to see is this thing's feet. And it reminded me of the scene from The Beast of Hollow Mountain, whenever the Allosaurus is plodding along and it actually shows its feet in the marshes. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that's sure what it made me think of. And then, it like looks down at the hobo before it saunters off, marches off. We get like this flock of birds that flies away because of its presence after it roars. Then it goes and attacks the farm. This is actually a really well shot sequence for a really lame movie. And then the other sequence, and this one is even better, is where the monster marches towards the amusement park. Because it starts off with this forced perspective shot of the monster walking towards the carnival. And then it fades to black. And then the next shots we get is this like mangy dog running through what looks like the remains of the carnival. I mean, none of the things are active. There's no signs of people anywhere. The rides aren't turned on. There's no lights or anything. It's a really creepy sequence. I mean, you can tell that they just like got there really early in the morning before anyone was there and just filmed it as the sun was coming out. But I mean, still, the scene was done with a lot of atmosphere. It's eerie. It's a very moody, the sequence. And I mean, it is just fantastic. But again, after the sequence is over, it's almost as if it didn't even happen because there's no reference to people missing or the thing attacking at all. It's just, just a scene that they tossed in because someone realized, hey, we could film the sequence and it'll look really cool. And then, they did it to drive people like me nuts. Yeah, that's the good, that's the bad, that is the story of the Milpitas Monster. My final thoughts on the film. I'm not going to say it's an absolutely terrible movie. Well, yeah, it's a terrible movie, but there's a lot of movies that are a lot better, but there's also a lot of movies that are a lot worse. The areas in which this movie fails is that, bring up plot points it doesn't go into after it brings them up, the human cast being incredibly annoying, and the lack of humor in a movie that's supposed to be all about humor. The good stuff for the film is the monster stuff. Like I said, the effects work is okay. The miniatures are pretty good. For a film with a very limited budget and someone who's actually on the special effects end of things, I can appreciate the special effects work because I know the kind of effort that goes into doing this stuff. Now, can I suggest you going out and watching this? No. No. I mean, if it happens to come on TV, which I doubt will ever happen, but if it ever does, give it a watch. If someone buys it for you, then yeah, go ahead and watch it, but I wouldn't say go out and seeking out this movie. It's not worth it. I mean, you guys heard my rundown for it. Did that really sound like anything you wanted to watch? It's really going to appeal to two types of people. People who are interested in just stupid humor, Adam Sandler fans. And then you got the people like me who are just big monster movie buffs, and we want to see every monster movie ever made. Now, if you're going to go out and watch this movie because you want to see the monster, as much as I like the monster, I can't really suggest you go watch the movie for this reason alone. Like I said, it's not really enough to warrant you tracking this film down to watch it. I mean, I get the curiosity aspect, and by all means, if you are curious, watch the movie. Is this movie irredeemable? No. I mean, I can appreciate this movie for the same fact that I like the movie Manos, the Hands of Fate. And, I'm the only person I'm probably one of the very few people who can actually look you straight in the eye and say, I love Manos, the Hands of Fate, and be serious about it, because I do like the movie. But the reason why I like that movie, and the reason why I'm going to be a little lenient on this film, is that I can appreciate how the film got made. You know, the fact that this film was even made at all is amazing. So, what is my rating for this film? I had to think really hard about what rating this movie was going to get, because at first I would have awarded it a skull. You know, it would have gotten a 0, because the things that matter the most in a story, which is, you know, the human characters and the story, you know, the story was non-existent, and the people, I didn't care what happened to them. And because of that, you know, I would have given it a non-existent score. But the saving grace for this film is the fact that the monster stuff does appeal to me, and it does have those rare moments where it's actually atmospheric and has a really good mood. So, because of these little elements, I'm going to award this movie a rating of 1.5. I'm sure that if this was reviewed by anyone else, they would look at you and say, "Oh, this movie gets a 0." But like I said, you know, I appreciate the special effects and I understand the hardships of trying to make a film. So, yeah, that the 1.5 is my final score. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this particular episode of ObscuReview. Join me next time where I will be reviewing Ultraman Episode 0, The Birth of Ultraman, which is something that even a lot of diehard Ultraman fans don't even know about. So join me next time. And as always, this is Jacob K. Baker for Atomic Stick Figure Productions. I bid thee a good night, and may God bless.